when we think about technology and humans, to find technology that helps bring people together.
Welcome everyone to another episode of WorkPod. Today we have very interesting guest with us. So we have with us Mark Avnet, who is a VP of Simulmedia. We have Jeffery, Chief People Officer at Pear Therapeutics. And one of the very interesting thing that we find very exciting is today's session is very interesting. So we have two guests who are. So Mark is very heavy on engineering, coming to the people world. Kathy is talent management, culture, and that side of the world. So we are excited for the session today because today we'll get to see two leaders coming from two different sides and helping define the future of work. With that, Kathy and Mark, welcome to the session.
Thanks, Vishal.
So let's start with Kathy. Why don't you walk us through your journey, your background, and some context?
Okay, great. Thanks, Vishal. Well, I'm really excited to be here. So thank you. And although Mark and I have just met the last 15 minutes, I think we're going to become fast friends today. So I'm excited to have that. I think lots of conversation around our passion topic. And I would say for myself, I have 20 years experience in people and talent. So that's both on, I consider myself a true generalist. So that means everything from employee relations all the way to strategic development, organizational development, talent management, and the like. So just a wide range of things that I've worked on in my career. And so at this point, my favorite is always helping people to be better in their jobs, and whatever that means to you. It could be helping to develop different programs in an organization around how people's careers can progress in an organization.
Fascinating, Mark.
Hi, yeah, I'm Mark Avnet. I have unlike Kathy, a very non-traditional background for somebody coming into HR. I actually, in college, I majored in physics because I wanted to understand how the world works at the most fundamental level, and quickly realized that the answer to that question was not in physics equations, but in people. So after working as a software engineer for a couple of years, getting a master's degree in public policy and a Ph.D. in engineering, I found myself in management consulting, where I quickly built a passion around organizational culture and the change. And specifically, I was doing a lot of transformation work as a consultant, process improvements and things like that in companies. And I was fascinated by the org side of it. What are the things that need to happen in the organization for the improvements to really stick over time? And that eventually, through a number of pathways, including some time in academia as a professor, eventually found myself into the HR space, initially through learning and development and change management, eventually into the performance management space, and currently broadening the aperture and working on becoming that generalist like Kathy is.
Fascinating. And Kathy and Mark, what does your company, each of your companies do? So if you can walk us through what's your day-to-day role look like, and what does your company do? And maybe Mark, you can go first if you want.
All right, great. So Simulmedia is we are a data-driven platform for video advertisers. For most of our history, we've worked in linear TV advertising. We have a data-driven platform that can predict where audiences will be. So rather than the legacy way of just putting ads out so millions of viewers see it and hoping you reach the right audiences, we can actually predict where those audiences will be. And that's kind of the core of our offering. We're expanding into a number of different areas now as well, all related to the video advertising space, and it's a really exciting time for how we're growing right now as a company.
Interesting. And Kathy?
Yeah, well, I work for Pear Therapeutics, and we are an organization that really helps to redefine how human disease is treated. So we started a new way of, how do we look at disease and how do we treat it? With that, we there's this term that's coined as prescription digital therapy, which really helps replace drugs, and it creates more of a patient-facing interventions with technology, machine learning, and real-world data. And with that, we as an organization have our first, second, and third PDT, prescription digital therapy, in the market, so that are FDA approved. They help patients that might have substance use disorder, opiate use disorder, and sleep insomnia, chronic insomnia, I should say. So it's the first ex-US market authorization through Singapore. We have also just a pipeline of different psychiatric modalities such as schizophrenia and depression, anxiety, some bipolar as well, and PTSD. So as an organization, we're constantly looking and developing our technology and how are we helping the world and our patients to get better.
Wow, I think that's the fascinating use of technology, and thank you for pursuing that. So this is a topic about future of work. So let's delve into and tease into that slowly. So what does future of work means to you from your vantage point? If you can help us understand that, and Kathy, if you want, you can go first.
Yeah. I love this question. It reminds me of, how as an organization or as people in this world today, how can we make things better for the next generation, as well as for everyone that, is potentially struggling right now. So the future of work to me is like, how do you keep things and make them simpler and intuitive for people? And I've always been a fan of give people the tools and the resources that they need, and then move out of the way. So keeping in that same vein, I would say that the future of work to me is around really looking at data, understanding a little bit more around how to do things better, and also having the data help tell the story of people, of systems, of processes, and on top of that, really knowing that in this day and age, just in the last year alone, it's changed so many things in the way that people feel about going into work, right? And now with so many organizations at a remote culture, keeping in mind that the future of work can always be, it has to be in a hybrid approach in many ways, because there's not a one size fits all. That as an organizations, you have to look at, your organization and what's going to fit with your culture, as well as how is that going to set you apart when you're trying to attract talent.
Interesting. Mark?
Yeah, I see certain trends that are happening in the world. Some of them directly related to the future of work, and some of them not. But it all has to do with the progression of technology, as well as just social norms and how people work. And there were things that were already happening as we started moving before COVID happened. Like, for example, having technology like we're on right now, like this, that enabled it. And in many ways, COVID has accelerated where we were headed anyway. When I look at the confluence of the technology, the social norms, and just what people get out of being in person and working together, I'm seeing a world where work is really more about where does an individual work most effectively, and how do they work most effectively in a given context or at a given time. So when I hear about hybrid models in terms of will people be in the office 3 days a week, or or will it be 5 days, or are you going fully remote? For me, what I hear from people is really around what is the work I have to do on a given day. And if I have a highly collaborative day and I'm going to be workshopping in a whiteboard with several people, then I need to be in the office and in that collaborative environment. And if I'm going to have a heads down day and I need to not have distractions, I think that there used to be a belief that, hey, we need to do that in the office because you have too many distractions at home. And I think what the world has learned in the last year is actually you don't necessarily have those distractions, and we can trust people to get the work done. And if you have that heads down day, it might be more productive to do it at home. But I don't think it's a matter of are we better remote or are we better in the office. It's a question of what work you're actually doing.
That's a very good point. So, Kathy, I think one thing that I found fascinating. So your company does deal with using technology to treat very high touch, basically issues or disease, right? So now, if and when we talk about, say, these futuristic technology, whether it's Zoom and basically these are all talking about having less and less touch points, the physical touch points, and using technology in the middle. We are now on a go-to meeting and having this conversation at totally three different places. If you connect these two worlds together, what you are seeing from what your company is producing to what you are seeing in employees, right? How they are coping up over the last 1 year, the touch points have decreased. The water cooler conversations have only gone down. So, walk us through what's your perspective on how do you think the workforce will do in this new age of more technology and maybe less physical touch points that we used to have?
Well, that's interesting. That I actually believe that we're going to have some more touch points than less. That's my view, but maybe it's going to be done in a different way than what we're used to. So, for instance, although we have three FDA regulated products, these products also still go through a patient service center. So you still have contact with a human being if you need it. So I think the way that we and other organizations are thinking about what do you describe as customer success, and how are you going to provide still that human element that's so important? I think 2020 was a big indicator that the human empathy and conversation and interaction is still needed, right? We have a lot of people in this world who might be a little bit more isolated and that kind of thing. And so really being able to figure out a way to bring everybody together using technology is really going to push the way that products are probably shaped more than anything.
Interesting. And Mark, what do you think? Like your technology, your company it's the center of data. So your people are like more data savvy. They understand this thing. What has been your observation? If you can walk us through that.
So I think Kathy's first point about needing more touch points, I think is really true. That being remote and separated from colleagues doesn't mean you talk to them less. It means you talk to them more. I actually joined Simulmedia during the pandemic. I started last July, and I found it to be an incredibly productive onboarding experience because I was able to make a point of talking to everyone. Actually, it's a small company, so I think that is very real. We are very much a technology company first. We play in the advertising space, but we have a tech platform. A large portion of our company is on the tech side, and our tech side is actually leading the effort, and in collaboration with me, but working on what does returning to the office look like. And we're actually having the engineering team take the lead on that because they're so central to how we work as a company. So they are sort of saying, okay, what are the needs that we have? What's the working model that's going to work best for the engineering team? And then we're going to get that in place, and then the rest of the company will follow suit.
Interesting. And this is the future of work context, right? So now if we say go back an year, say early March or late February, future of work had been in the center of conversation for last couple of years now. That okay, chip-based technology is now a lot more capable. So we should think about having basically redefining the work. And now with the 1 year of pandemic in the middle, if you help us walk through your perspective on what future of work really has, the definition has evolved for you pre to post pandemic, right? So what, say February end, what does that future of work meant to you as a leader in HR space, and what it means to you now? If you both can talk briefly about that.
Yeah, I think we're touching on it from both sides of it, because of course, like every company, thinking about how do we return to the office and what does the future look like in terms of how people collaborate. But we were already on a path toward the way I think people thought about future of work before the pandemic, as you were alluding to, which is really around automation, AI, machine learning. What does that do to the products and services and the way people operate, and what does that mean for jobs? So right now, although we have a data-driven platform that helps us to identify what TV inventory spots for advertisements that we should buy, we still have a pretty manual process of doing the planning and buying and actually running the ad campaigns. And we're looking at building more and more automation into that. So what that means then is that our operations team that does the planning and buying the nature of the work that they do will be shifting, and it'll be less tactical and operational, more strategic and analytical, more focused on exception handling as that work comes in. So I think the kind of previous view of future of work, which still applies, is this idea of what's the upskilling and reskilling that needs to happen. I don't think jobs go away, but the particular skills people need and how they interface with technology will change. What COVID has done is also not necessarily introduced, but as I said before, accelerated this notion of where do you actually have to be to do that work.
Fascinating. Kathy, your 2 cents.
Yeah, very similar to what Marcus said. I mean, I see, the way that we're using data. So for instance, a year ago, we didn't have as many positions on the data, and just in the last year or so, we're getting ready to post a few more positions, data engineers, data analysts, to really be able to look at the way that our organization provides insights to our payers, to the folks that are helping to bring our product to fruition. So it's really a great thing, I would say, around when you think about automation and how that affects the world. I think there's a bigger emphasis in it because a lot of people are feeling that that's the way that you're going to be able to continue to scale for organizations. There's a lot of, whether it's you're a public company or a private company, startup or a Fortune 500, right? There are growth trends that are showing that the more automation that you can put into it, the better. And then hiring the people who can tell those stories, or the people who can help make that automation happen, will continue to grow. Like, I think that's, if anybody's in that industry, or if you're just newly graduate, it's a great time to be in that area. So from a growth perspective, I see that the opportunities will be unlimited for people coming in.
Interesting. And one thing, if I can ask both of you, so some of the surprises, right? So over the last 1 year, when it comes to your ability or your organization's ability to handle this new sort of external change that is heavily impacting the way every businesses are working today. So what would that walk us through some of the surprises that or some of the things that surprised you, whether positive or negative, as an HR leader leading in organizations through this disruptive times.
Are you talking about the surprises that happened in 2020?
Yes. So So during the COVID, then we'll walk on the future of work perspective. But yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I don't think that when we shut down our offices on March 6th last year, we thought we were going to come back at the end of the month of March. We told everyone, go home, take what you need for a month, and we're going to be back. And then, 3 months happened, and then 6 months happened, and lo and behold, it's been a year. We just made our year anniversary in our organization. We had a town hall meeting with all of our employees, and we talked a little bit about not only the struggles that we have, but what were some of the joys that came from it. So what hobbies how did COVID bring people together? And so when I look at 2020, it was a tough year for so many people, and still is tough going into 2021. But I think that everything from the social unrest to people and their families that have suffered because of COVID, whether they contracted the disease, to whether they lost their jobs, or something about COVID made their life different and not as fruitful as it was prior. Right? Everyone's limited now in what they do, so there's so many different avenues depending on the person and how people are resilient enough in some ways to bounce back or to adjust to it. There's so many different things that happened last year that are really what I would say catastrophic for some people, and others people are flourishing. So it's a wide range. And I think as an organization, we look at that. And so internally, we put in a number of things to help employees during these times.
And Mark, for you?
So as I said before, I started with Simulmedia during the pandemic. I could speak a little bit to how things were before based on what I've heard and how I've seen things progress. But one thing that I think might be a little different, we did shut down the office last March. We actually reopened it in early July with very limited capacity. And basically our approach all along has been we want to make the office feel safe and comfortable for anybody that wants to come in, but we're by no means encouraging or asking anybody to come in. And that's been kind of how we've operated. And I guess if I said any surprise that came out of it would be kind of how well that has worked. That individuals that have chosen to come in, people who live nearby, for example, they come in and it's not a problem. It's seamless, and others stay home, and we work virtually. I expected some level of asymmetry when you have some people in the office and some not. And that may happen if we get back to a state where there's a few people remote and many people in the office. But the playing field has been sufficiently leveled with everybody kind of being remote. Even with a handful of people in the office, it hasn't really disrupted things. Things have gone really smoothly, to be honest. What I will say is we do believe as a company that we're better together, and we are moving more and more toward getting back into the office, and that's something that we're working through, because it's very important to us that broadly we're back in the office and working together once this is all done. But we're also very intent on making sure that we can help each individual address any particular concerns that they might have. But yeah, that's
interesting. And so considering, so now let's get on the good side of the conversation, the future of work, post COVID, life is good now, heading forward, looking forward. So if you look at the HR organization as such, or HR basically landscape as such, what do you guys think? How prepared is HR when it comes to understand, basically addressing the future of work challenges that an organization has to go through? Walk us through, like, what's your perspective on that? And Mark, you can go first if you want here.
I don't think anybody was really prepared for what the world has looked like in the past year, and that refers both to the pandemic and something Kathy alluded to before around social unrest that we've seen more and more in the world. And it's really, the past year has been sort of game changing in many ways. So is HR broadly prepared? I would say no. We're all still learning. We're all still figuring it out. And even in the midst of trying to figure out what does the future look like in terms of post-pandemic and hybrid models, and whether you're in the office, you add to that this layer of increased awareness around social justice issues, and the fact that more and more people and more companies are really eager to be a part of the solution and try to do what they can to address this, and figuring out how to do that and how to navigate it, especially in the world we're living in, where people can't be together to share stories and take action, and finding ways of doing that. It's complicated and messy, and I think all of us are kind of muddling through and trying to figure out our way. Are we making progress? Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I think I'd be disingenuous to say we have it figured out.
Interesting. Kathy?
Yeah, Mark, I think you said it best. It's like, we don't know what next month will bring, right? There's the Brazilian and South African variants that are running rampant now. We can only hope that the vaccination will be that enough people will be motivated to want to get the vaccination, so that we have more of a herd mentality around eliminating this disease. So as a organization, and as an HR leader, how that's changed my job is completely different. My job every day before 2020 was around change management, and now it's crisis management. Still to this day, and although it's gotten better than it was in March, April, May, and June of last year, it's still a lot of unknowns that are out there. So for myself, one of the things that I think that's really important is to ensure that leaders are empathetic, that they are being thoughtful with their employees, and whether it's a new hire coming on board, or somebody who's been there and has been a little bit more senior, that they take everybody's situation and consider it as an individual. So you might have somebody who's a parent who has their own struggles with, having to do homeschooling for the first time in their lives, to having people that are, that are single and isolated in a small apartment, and that's difficult for single people, right? So you just have a wide breadth of complexities around people and their individual situations that they're struggling with. So the future of work is around understanding and being empathetic around other people and their what they're going through nowadays. So I think that's really key. So any technology won't matter if you don't have that as part of your ability to really kind of understand people and what's going on. Now, but the great thing is you can use any kind of data that you have So I hope that what comes from this is that we're going to have some really great HR systems because none of them really talk to each other or work together. So it'd be great to have like better systems. How are we going to be able to get, you'll see a lot of things around, or at least I have started seeing things around getting employee sentiments. What's the mood of employees? And so I think if we think about technology and how we can utilize it as HR folks, as like looking at that and really getting a pulse of your employees. And there's plenty of really great systems out there, but I expect that there's going to be a lot more that it will be developed over the years.
I think that's a very interesting point, Kathy. So I was talking to one gentleman a couple of days back, and he's an HR leader for a large cap company, and we were talking about the perception shift over the last 1 year and what was and what is now. And he was telling me that, hey, in our chart, I never envisioned that, as you, Kathy, you even said that daycare manager, like having an employee understand how to all these sort of daycare management or workforce stress, and then financial situation, family grievances. And they said that those are a lot of things that we never used to think in a future of work context when we started pre-pandemic. But today, last 1 year, we had been dealing with, and I think you put it up best, crisis management situation. Well, most of these scenarios are hitting to the entire organization, whether it's cultural context, whether it's socioeconomic conditions, whether it's social unrest, whatever we call it. And basically, it was very difficult for 1 year to understand the center of gravity for an organization, like what is going on, what is a peace situation for an organization to work as usual. So from both of your vantage point, when do you think, standing today, that your organization would be in a reasonable state for you to start looking forward post-pandemic, saying, okay, now let's focus on, as you said, change management instead of crisis management?
Well, we're always looking for that, first off. It's what are the opportunities? So I think what we have to think about is, what are the resources that you're giving your employees? And so I would say a couple of them that as an organization, we gave our employees is actually three different ways that we wouldn't have even probably have imagined before 2020. We gave employees access to have coaching as well as therapy, through technology, and that they can select a coach online, whether it's through their phone or on their computer, as well as a therapist. It's directly paid for. It's covered. They get 12 sessions a year for free. That is paid through the organization. It's all confidential. So that's when we use it. We use the service through an organization called Modern Health, which has been really, really great. We have pretty high utilization rate on that now. We also have, from an organization perspective, is we thought about parents and what are they going through. This is new for everyone, and no one expected to become a teacher, a parent, as well as a worker all in the same day, at the same time. So. So we offered up a tool called Helper, which helps the parents with finding childcare resources, and also helps pay through that service as well, and just provides outlets for parents to find other like-minded parents and talk about those stresses that they have as well. So it's a great platform that our parents are really adapting now. And then lastly, because we are in the business of helping serious disease, one of our products is a chronic insomnia app, and that's called Somrest. And Somrest is for us, I would say for me personally, I was their number one customer. Really an ability to help people who have had issues sleeping this past year. It's myself, I don't know how many times, I can't even count on my hands how many times I couldn't fall asleep for the last year, and was unable to, and pulled one-nighters because of it. So what Somrest has helped me do is like have more sleep than I've had in my entire life, I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy. I learned about, just as an individual, like how important sleep is to your mental health as well as your livelihood and how you function in your job. And the importance of it is really key to people. So, and to me especially, but we have a number of employees, and from what I understand, there's a lot of people in this world that are struggling with the same thing.
Interesting. Mark?
Yeah, I think that Kathy's point about providing access to mental health services and things like that is really critical. We have Teledoc, which is a standard offering that that people can use and that our employees have access to be able to see mental health professionals, etc., virtually. On the point about um, homeschooling and or teaching people becoming teachers and how you deal with that. That's one of the issues that has been really top of mind for us, especially as we're thinking about going back to the office. And we actually have a date in mind of July 1st to transition back. That's going to be heavily dependent on how the vaccine rollout turns out, and assuming everybody that wants to be vaccinated can by then. But assuming that we're targeting July 1st to start making this happen. But for parents that have kids that are at home and have difficulty finding childcare as a result, that's gonna change things for those individuals. When we look at the company as a whole, I love the things that Kathy mentioned that they put in place. We're actually pretty small as a company, and the perspective that we're able to take, which I think is great, is rather than bringing in those platforms, we're small enough that we can actually work with each individual on what is their specific situation and be able to accommodate each person based on their particular needs. So if somebody does have kids that aren't getting back in school and they can't find childcare, that's fine, and they'll continue to work from home longer. Whereas others that don't have those restrictions will be looking at coming to the office sooner.
Interesting. And sorry.
Our company is very similar to Mark's in that respect. We're calling it optional, right? Like we're giving the employees the ability to make a decision based on what their life looks like, and I think that's really an important thing.
Interesting. And now let's talking about your core challenges today. So if something keeps you up at night, like walk us through what are one or two challenges that are sort of most pressing you as an HR leader for an organization today, in today's time. Yeah.
Well, mine is always around people. I would say everything keeps me up at night. But no, seriously, I started with Somros in December, and I feel as if that really helped me in sleep. But to keep me up at night, it's usually around, how do we solve problems around people? And it's always that. So whether it's, we have to implement something to support people, how do we bring the best to everyone that can allow them to be able to thrive. So that's really where I tend to not be able to sleep at night. And so things like COVID, things like, are people able to be productive? Are they happy? It's hard for anybody to be happy these days. So it's, how do you help your employees, find joy in their day, even at work when they can, right? So we put a lot of things in place. The other things, with all the social injustice stuff last year, we built out a lot of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And so that is, when it's your first time as an HR leader implementing those things, you always worry about, is this enough? What else can you do? That kind of thing. So that's also a topic that usually keeps me up. at night as well. It keeps me reading, right? Because you want to keep continuing learning what other people are struggling through.
Interesting.
I think that's an important one.
And Mark?
Yeah, I'm glad you ended on that point, Kathy, because that's really, if I'm really honest about the one thing that really, keeps me up at night, everything has its challenges involved, and certainly the situation with the pandemic and getting back to work does. But as an HR leader, the thing that really keeps me up at night is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's how do you do it well? How do you get it right? And I think what's particularly challenging at Simulmedia in doing that is that there's so much interest and so much fervor throughout the company, and everybody really wants to make a difference and really wants to be a part of positive change in the world to really address these challenges. But the problem is that we don't always necessarily know what that looks like. So it's not just is it enough, but are we doing the right things? Are we focusing in the right way? We've done a number of we call them learning days, where we bring the whole company together, or smaller segments of the company, and have open conversations. And we've brought in outside facilitators to help guide us through those conversations. We've put together initiatives, particularly on diversity hiring, as well as creating an inclusive culture inside to ensure that those people stay. But it's always this open question about not even, like I said, not just are we doing enough, but are we even thinking about the right things and probing on the right areas? And it's just such a it's so easy to take something that's right intentioned and to where strategy meets execution is probably more challenging in the DEI space than maybe anything else that I've encountered as an HR leader.
Interesting. So we as an organization, so we did, and I'm glad we are talking about this. It's a very interesting topic. So in our radar, so we did a brief market research on understanding some of the core challenges of HR and future of work and sort of talent. And DEI became one of the I think it's one of the top 5. It shows up as one of the challenge there. But when we looked at the what's out there today to help address this problem, are we having enough support, and are we having enough outlets to basically bring the diversity and inclusion and those aspects out and into the organization? We did not find enough excitement on the community side, not enough platform that as so basically it's organizations are a lot more aware about the scenarios in our research. Then we found the equal communities that are out there providing this services and facilities, because I think, Mark, you have a very interesting point that although it's high on urgency, but no one really knows how to go about it. It's that perception. So from your vantage point, and Kathy, from your vantage point, how to fix that? Like, what do you see as an opportunity for the community to pitch in, and what's your take, if you can walk us through that? And maybe Mark, you can go first if you want.
I was going to say, I was hoping that Kathy was going to go first.
I don't mind. I'll go first. I actually do think that there are people that know this space so well, which is why I think, Mark, you referenced that you went through an outside consulting firm, it sounds like, as well as we did. You want to find the right fit for your culture. And it's actually, I've never seen it done in any other company before. So for me, I love the fact of, finding an organization like we did. And there's a lot of them out there. There's large organizations, and then there's individual consultants that you can find. If if you're an HR person listening in, I'm sure you're probably already ingrained in some of those connections, but there are some really great ones out there. We just, as an organization, brought in a company called Paradigm to come in and help us with allyship. Because what we found in 2020, I helped lead a couple of discussions in 2020 around racism, and what we were finding is that employees wanted to know, what could they do? How can they support other employees in the organization? How can they support people on the street that they pass by, that they feel some emotion towards wanting to support them? So as a company, we brought in this organization to help us with a number of things. We kind of took what I would say like a four-pronged approach around one, allyship, and really building on what that looks like, so that people had some kind of tools and ideas of what that could be. And then also just in a general language and across the board and what that meant. The second would be around, we also, they have a great platform, a learning platform called Reach that allows your employees to go in, and they have over a dozen modules in there that you can read. Your employees can take it at any given time. And so we have it for, a couple of years. And so what employees can do is new hires come in, if they miss the allyship training, they at least have this tool. So that's one. The other is like we're doing across the board assessment, everything in our organization from HR to engineering, and really looking at everything that we do and how to make that more diverse and inclusive for our organization. So that's recruiting and performance management, rewards and recognition. We're even looking at buying software that's going to help us with our job descriptions and how we write those. Are they being inclusive enough? So that technology, that's when technology, I love it. It allows you to be able to give it to everyone, and it really levels the playing field for people because of it. And then the other things are around, making sure that your leaders are comfortable as well, or get them uncomfortable to become comfortable, I like to say, so that they can start having conversations, because we have a small HR department. We can't do it all. And so the big part is like educating your leaders so that they can lead their teams is really key.
Great point.
Did I answer your question?
I think that is a very good point. So Mark.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great response, and I'm really fascinated by all the great things you're doing, Kathy. That's fantastic. I love that notion of the allyship, and it's something we've been working on and talking about. Hearing about specific trainings that actually directly address, I think, is going to be critical. And it's something that I want to kind of bring in house, and it makes me think about one of the things that that when I talk to other HR leaders around what's important here. Some people say, hey, it starts with recruiting. You have to get diversity inside, because that's how you kind of get that flywheel spinning, and you promote diversity by having diversity. Others say it starts with inclusion. You have to create that inclusive environment so that you can not just attract diverse talent, but create an environment that they want to stay in once they're there. And the big challenge seems to be, where do you start in that sort of back and forth process between the two of attracting really great diverse talent and creating an inclusive environment when they're there, and that's kind of how we're thinking about where do we do it, and we're trying to address both at the same time. But frankly, like I said, we're figuring it out. And Kathy, I'm going to take some of your points there. I think a lot of that is really great advice for any HR leader and how they're thinking about implementing these programs.
Interesting. And on the DI front, so what is something that is working for you. So some strategies, some snippets, some execution that you have seen generate success for you. If you can if you can describe that for our listeners and viewers, so at least they know what you did, and you end up getting some success, if anything, out of it. So that will be helpful. Kathy,
Yeah,
you can
well,
go first.
there's this saying that diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance. You think about that. And a big part is around what I would say is like bringing awareness to people. What does allyship even mean? Like in some cases, people just think, oh, I'm, having Mark's my ally. Well, Mark and I can be allies, but if he supports or in some ways, but if he's not saying anything in a meeting that we're in and not supporting me, then he's not really an ally. So how do you bring that around? And so we're teaching people how to take the next step, to be good coworkers, to really kind of support each other and know that one person's day might be different than the next, and to keep that in mind. So when I think about diversity and bringing tools to people that are inclusive, that also gives them a sense of belonging, is really key. And so that's where I think when technology starts to really do that, I think we'll see more of that, I believe, in the next couple of years. And I'm sure there's people that are thinking of all these great things that we'll see rolled out soon. So
interesting. Mark?
So what I've seen be really successful is sort of grassroots efforts in the company. One thing that I think was really great that happened at Simulmedia not long before I joined was a group of employees, 10 or 12, which is more than 10% of our company, came together to form a committee they call the IDEA Committee, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Awareness. And it becomes an employee-led effort around this with the people who are highly passionate about it. And what that group of employees has been able to do. And of course, I've joined it and helped to spearhead a lot of the initiatives since I joined the company. Is things like regular learning days, which I mentioned before. Sometimes facilitated internally, sometimes with an outside advisor that we work with. And those learning days, really the things where we bring the whole company together to talk about these things. And yes, we break out into smaller groups to allow for everybody to be able to speak their mind. But just kind of getting that awareness out there and getting people talking about it and providing a forum for the conversation has been hugely successful. And I think one of the mechanisms behind that is we have full-throated support from our CEO on this, and it's incredibly important to him that we do this. It's very hard with to propose to a to an executive, hey, let's bring the whole company together for half a day to focus on one topic because people's time is so valuable. But on this topic, we always have the buy-in for that because it's so important, and we do get such great response from it, and it's doing a lot to build awareness. Where we come out of it on the other side is, so now what do we do with that? We come out of it with a lot of energy and a lot of desire for people, among people, to take action, but then it goes back to, but what can we do now? And that's where the tremendous success of opening the conversation starts to lead to a new challenge of how do we translate this to action.
I think that's beautifully said, Mark. So it reminded me of a conversation. So about the failures of executing something like this, right? So I was talking to one of the leader about walk us through some of your at least one or two challenge that you have faced in building, and they actually, so he was telling us about that they hired a consultancy firm, they brought them on board, they gave us some recommendation, and then our leadership was not ready, right? So the culture wasn't permitting many of these processes. So there was a constant back and forth with the leadership, and it pretty much drained everyone out while they all were feeling the heat of not having a good DIA program in place. But it was very, very hard to put this thing through. So if I may ask you guys to walk us some of your challenges that you have seen or you are seeing in executing your DEI, so others leaders can sort of relate with your pains. What would that be? So maybe Mark, you can go if you want to walk us through some of the challenges that you are seeing.
Yeah. For me, I think it's the separation between the near term and the long term. It's taking that energy around, hey, we want to make big change and we want to have plans for, one conversation we've been having a lot internally is this isn't about one session. You can't have one session and bring people together and talk about it and break and say, okay, great, now we're an inclusive environment, it's solved, it's all done. That doesn't work. So you want to have that longer term strategy where you're looking at specific actions that you're taking, you're having the right trainings, you're focused on diversity hiring, you're building that inclusive culture, and you're having a series maybe of sessions that are leading up to real action planning. But when you take the sort of that long-term perspective and how do you do that, and then the rubber meets the road against energy to do something right now and a lot of urgency to do something right now, you start getting caught in this balance of, okay, what we can do right now, and this is real because we're actually planning a session right now that we had planned a session and we decided relatively last minute to postpone it because we realized that we weren't spending enough time on it to do the topic real justice. So now the question becomes, okay, this is part of a longer term strategy that we're really going to be focused on making change, but we want the momentum of, keep pushing forward on what we have. So that's what I've found to be sort of tremendously challenging, is sort of how do you sort of balance the near-term energy with the sort of thoughtfulness and intentionality it takes to do it right over the long term.
Interesting. Yeah, Kathy, about you?
Yeah, I love what Mark had to say. I'd agree, and I'd say that if you're thinking about, like, it's new, right, for many organizations. There's some that were a couple of years ahead on the DEI space and bringing in training and that kind of thing. And there's no guarantee when you go through those trainings. You don't know how it's going to land with some people. It could upset people. There's in some ways, if somebody says something that in their mind might be inappropriate. So there's a lot of nuances when it comes to people, and so you just hope that it's going to land, and it's the start. That's how I think I feel. I don't know what pets are going to do when we go back to work. I'll tell you that.
By the way, it's fun. So
He's really rambunctious today. So, but so I think for organizations, and our organization in particular, it's fairly new. So we've just started implementing these since like around August of last year. So everything that we bring, people have been really appreciative. And, I think that, there's more of that than the opposite. So is it successful? I think it is. Is it enough? I don't feel like it's ever enough. Like, I almost feel as if we, what else can we be doing is always, and that goes back to what keeps us up at night, right? Like, it's like, what else can we do to help solve problems with people, to give them what they need so that they can either have a sense of peace or be able to do their jobs well. And so, I would say it's to be determined as the days go on, and as our world begins to change, we have to look at those kinds of things and continue to keep evolving. It's like a river, right? You put your foot in, and it's not the same every time the wave comes by. There's constant flow and change, and I think as organizations, if you're not changing, if you're not providing your employees with resources or understanding that, I think what ends up happening is that your organization might become stagnant. So I think if there's anybody looking for for new opportunities. It's not only career development that they want, but they want to know that the people that they work with are going to provide good camaraderie, that they're like-minded people that want to learn and continue to grow in an organization. So.
Well put. And if so, and we're almost at the end of this conversation. So if our listeners and viewers or other HR leaders say they want to start in this DII journey, what would you suggest the 2 to 3 steps that they can take now tactically to have a good start, picking something from your experience, if you can walk us?
Well, I love what Mark said. Mark's talked about his company creating a group, right? And 10 to 12 people started to form. And it was very similar with us. They actually formed in 2019, but became more active in 2020. So we had a couple of groups that started. We call it our EEC, our Employee Engagement Council, the DEI group. And then what formed this year in August was a Pear. We call it Pear Givers. So it's parents and caregivers. So we have to think about that too, right? It's not just people who are taking care of their children, but that maybe they're taking care of their mother or father. And so they came together, and from that, I think those groups are going to tell you what they need. And in some cases, our caregivers didn't even know what they needed and how to get it or what was out there. So really what's key, listening skills. And so going in and listening to what your employees have to say. And, we did so many surveys last year. It was like, do you want to return to the office survey? Do you, what do you need survey? What do you need for your home office survey? And so continue to listen and ask questions, I think is really important. And using, technology to do that, to make it easier, will be really key, especially for organizations that have small HR departments.
Very good point. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah. So when I think tactically, like you said, on what can you do, I think first and foremost, having very, very vocal support from senior leadership is absolutely critical, and that the organization hears that this is a priority and this is something that is top of mind for the company's senior leaders. I think second, to start out with tactically, open the conversation, provide a forum for people to really just talk about it, and try to create a space where people from, regardless of what background they're coming from, and that they feel comfortable voicing their concerns and challenges related to the topic. And then finally, to the point Kathy brought up, really encouraging that sort of activism among employees. And when you see that energy of employees wanting to sort of self-organize to make change, to encourage it and provide real resources for it, give them a budget, give them the time and space to be able to work on it. Those would be the things I think tactically to start. Further down the road, you might start thinking then about okay, now that we've started these conversations, let's think about what we want to do in terms of our hiring pipeline and how we address that, and what do we do to build that inclusive culture. But a lot of that is just having the conversations happen internally in the first place.
Actually, that makes me think of a conversation, Mark, and I don't know if you started thinking about this or not, but I remember our first employees that started in like March and April that we extended offers. They never even came into the office or met a person face to face. And so we have a lot of those situations right now because it's a year later and we've hired probably 30 or 40 people. And so, how do you get people in your organization to, around, getting people to embrace that we have people who've never met others face to face. Right.
So, like, how do you kind of encourage the conversation and the openness? You mean among people that have never met each other?
Yeah, there's almost like when you meet somebody face to face, whether it's you're in a company and you get to shake their hand, or you're standing by the water cooler, the bevy machine, as they like to say now, when you're doing that, you can create a bond just on small talk. And so now that small talk is gone, right? Like you start meetings and they go in most cases. And so new hires might not have an ability. Then I almost think there's a technology that we need to create that will help people bring them together to personalize who they are. I don't know, some thought like that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think we use Slack for that. I'm gonna be honest with you. Before the pandemic, I didn't really get the world's fascination with Slack, because it always seemed like, well, if you're going to send an email, send an email. If you're going to have a conversation, have a conversation. But I found Slack to be tremendously valuable during the pandemic, because the sort of drive-bys at people's desks. Hey, you drop by and you just have a conversation. Hey, we haven't met yet. I want to get to know you, or just chat about such and such topic. That Slack has provided the forum, I think, to be able to do that virtually. So I always have Slack open. It's always popping up. Can it be distracting? Sure, but I find that it creates that. The other thing that I think is helpful to do, and it's hard to do in practice, is maybe allow a little time for that small talk at the beginning of meetings, even if it means scheduling the meeting a little bit longer than you really need. I find myself doing that just on an ad hoc basis, but it might be a good thing to actually do intentionally. But you're right; it's a challenge, especially when you're talking about these sensitive, difficult topics. And I think that's where, if we take it back to DEI in particular, I think that's where having experienced outside facilitators is really helpful, because when you're dealing with a group of people that haven't really gotten to know each other, having that facilitation can really help to spark that conversation and get people open.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, I love Slack for that reason too.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is, so one of the things you just made me think of an idea that we could do, which is maybe when there's a new hire starting, we can post their picture on Slack as well, and give maybe some fun facts about the person. And maybe there's just going to be a channel called New Hires. That might be good.
Actually, I'm glad you said about the fun fact. We have a weekly all hands meeting at our company, and actually, when the pandemic started, we made it twice a week for a period of time, just to keep everybody connected. But one thing that we do at the all hands is, every time we have somebody new who started, we have their manager introduce them briefly. They talk about their background, and then they have to have a fun fact about themselves that they provide. So we do that, and we do it live, and I think that helps too, because we're small enough that we can bring the whole company together in that sort of forum.
So one example I can, if I can pitch in. So one example, I was talking to someone about this challenge of people are not talking to, and he was saying that one of the struggle that and again, so they're a large company, about 20,000 workers. And he was saying that earlier, work and life used to be pretty different, right? So work, and then there's life. And Kathy, you brought up a very interesting point. Now, if the camera is on, the life is there's no sort of work. And they said that they always used to be in work, a lot of life swirls, and in life, a lot of work swirls. That used to give you slightly lead into what's going on. But right now, that piece is gone, and it's adding a lot more pressure. So what this particular company does, it's pretty fascinating. So they created a page, and in that page, basically, it just two random people shows up, and then they have to talk. So that's the idea. So you're talking to random people all the time, right? So and that takes the fear out. That help people connect that they're more than these guys. And pretty much they have and the program has been really successful in their company. And they said that whenever you open that page, they know who is opening, and then one of their coder designed that page, and they were thinking of making it public at some point. But that's one interesting hack. Pretty remarkable.
I love that. I love that. We do something similar with Slack and something called a donut.
Yeah, we use the donut app as well.
Yeah, so it's so awesome. So we do 3 people, coffee, or your favorite bevy, and you have a chance to meet randomly 2 other people besides yourself, and you have an hour to talk with each other and get to know each other. And what I think we found, or at least I've done at least 3 of those in the last 6 or 7 months, is that you find commonalities of things. You just talk until you find something, and you find commonalities, and then you walk away and you go, oh, I know that person. We like dance. We like the same kind of dance, or same kind of music. And then, you get a little sneak peek into someone. I love those things. We need more. We need more.
We need more. Absolutely.
That's an interesting nuance of what you said that seems like a small detail, but it could make a difference, is that you do it in 3s rather than 2s. We've been doing it in 2s. Do you find that that setting those meetings up as 3 people, really remove some of the pressure? Like, what are the advantages of doing it that way?
Yeah, I definitely think it does. Especially, so there's introverts and extroverts. I'm right on the border. I can be an introvert and not talk to anybody all day, and I'm fine. And other days I might need to have, social interaction. So, but there are people who are truly introverted and might not necessarily want to share an hour conversation with someone else. So having that third person kind of takes off that burden from just one person having to kind of carry a conversation. So that's why we picked 3.
I like that. We had a lot of momentum when we introduced the Donut app, but over time you start to see fewer and fewer people taking advantage of it. And I wonder if doing it in groups of 3 can kind of re-energize it, and then you start seeing dynamics among other people. You get a break from the conversation, and you can observe. And it's an interesting way of doing it. And again, I thought it seemed like a small thing, but it can make a big difference.
We actually did it even before the pandemic. And so what we would do is we gave employees a credit card, and so they can go to their favorite local coffee shop. All 3 of them would walk together and pick whatever coffee shop they wanted. And they'd usually find like the coolest one, with the best matcha or whatever. And they using them come back, give the credit card back. And so we don't have that now. So I actually suggested, we got to bring that back. Even though people are at home, they can still give them a $10 gift card and let them buy coffee and know that they'll drink it at some point. It's kind of like still going to the cafe.
It's a clever idea. So guys, we're almost in the tail end. Sorry, Mark, you want to say something?
No.
Awesome. So now, as a closing mark for our listeners and viewers, so if you want something that our listeners and viewers would take away from the conversation, from your experience leading an organization into the future of work, like what would that be? What would be your thought or takeaway that other HR leaders could sort of take from your experience? And Kathy, you can go first if you want.
Okay. I would say that when we think about technology and humans, to find technology that helps bring people together. I think that's what I feel from our conversation today. Like, if you're a budding entrepreneur, if you are somebody who is going to look for their first job or their next job, find the elements of the next technology or company that you're going to work with that is going to really be able to help enhance people's lives in whatever way, shape, or form. I think that will be really key.
Beautifully put, Mark.
So if I think back on this conversation, I would say, to sum it up in a word, the future of work is personal. That it's our home lives and our work lives are colliding, like you said before, Vishal. I've heard people say it's not working from home, it's living at work. It's everybody has their own unique needs and circumstances, whether it's related to returning to the pandemic or just in regular life, that everybody has unique needs and circumstances that need to be addressed. When you think about issues of social justice in the world, everybody has their own perspectives and everybody has a valid viewpoint that needs to be heard. So one of the kind of ironies is, I agree with Kathy completely about finding the technologies that help to support collaboration. But the interesting thing is, as the world becomes more and more centered on technology, it actually, perhaps ironically, brings out that sort of personal nature of work more and more. And I think what matters to the individual is gonna become much more important at work going forward.
Beautifully put, Mark. With that, thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Mark, for being candid about your experience and helping us understand the state of organizations through COVID and helping understand the importance of DEI. From what I captured from the notes, I think, Mark, you put up best, future of work is personal. I think that's beautifully put. Committee, so build committees to help understand and create sort of this local advocacy and activism groups to help. And Kathy, as you rightly said, that only bring diversity to the party if inclusion is dancing. So that's a beautiful way to put it. With that, thank you so much, guys, for your time. You're always welcome back on the podcast, and love to have you back and discuss more into DEI and the state of organization as we're going through this future of work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal.
I was homesick, never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick.